This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. My guest is the king of pricing, specifically the king of impact pricing, Dr. Mark Stiving, Ph.D. Welcome to The Speaking Show, my friend.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. I can't wait to start this conversation.
So pricing it's so important, so vitally important. So let me start with the cliche. When you hear people say, sometimes it's people like me, you hear people say, well, pricing is part art and part science. Is that true or false? Or let's just use that as a springboard for your initial thoughts.
It is very fair to say that it is part art and it is part science. However, there is ton to know that people don't understand when it's time to do pricing. And it's layers upon layers of what am I going to assume today versus what am I going to assume next time. We so often hear companies talking about cost plus pricing. Oh, it costs me this much, and so therefore I'm going to charge this much more to get a margin. And that's just an assumption that they've made. Turns out it's not profit optimizing, but it's an assumption.
Right.
And so what we want to do, hopefully today, is explore some of those fundamental concepts that your listeners can use to help them adjust their pricing.
I know that in your impact pricing book, early on, maybe even one of the first things we talk about is defining value and defining this mysterious term that a lot of people talk about, but no one explains it quite the way you do, about value-based pricing. Talk about that.
Oh my gosh. Value-based pricing is actually really simple to understand. It's just impossible to do. The really simple to understand is I want to charge what my customers are willing to pay me. Now, I can never, though, get into my customer's head and understand exactly how much they're willing to pay. So I could never really do value-based pricing in that respect. But the single best way to think about pricing is always how much do I think my customer is willing to pay, and then charge that. Now, can I tell you a really quick story?
Sure.
I first launched the book Impact Pricing. I've never been paid to speak in my life. And this was, 10 years ago now or 8 years ago. And someone called me up and said, would you come give a talk? And I said, sure. And they asked the worst question ever. How much do you charge? I'm a pricing guy and I am struggling with this question. I go on the internet and I'm looking, okay, how much do people charge for prices? And, if you just have a book, it should be in this range. So I said $2,500. And he said, yes. And then I got a call a little bit later. Hey, how much do you charge? And I said, $3,500. And they said, yes. And then I got a call a little bit later and they said, how much do you charge? And I said, $5,000. And they said, yes. The problem is, I and every new speaker in the world doesn't know what the market is willing to pay, doesn't know what buyers are willing to pay. And in one of your programs that I've seen, you laid that out so nicely for your students in terms of here's what I think meeting planners would pay. Here's what they think when they see these prices. That was gold for your audience.
I was going to ask you about that next, actually, because I am, compared to you, certainly, I'm a pricing amateur. I'm a marketing expert, but a pricing amateur. In your experience, and even in the impact pricing book, how does pricing impact the perception of what they're buying?
Oh, it's huge. Price is always a signal of quality. Now, the question comes down to how much do they already know? For example, if I've seen you speak 100 times and I know that you're absolutely brilliant and you're still only charging $100 a speech, I'll pay you $100 to come speak. I know you're awesome. But if I don't know and you're going to charge me $100, I'm really worried about that. That may not be a speech that I want in front of my audience.
So there is, and it's funny because we talk about this in the program sometimes, that what's the difference between a $4,500 speaker and a $7,500 speaker? And the answer that, like you were saying, Mark, one has a book, one has a Ph.D., and the other one doesn't. One's been doing it for 20 years and one's been doing it for 2 years. All kinds of answers. My answer is, I just nod my head as they give all these other answers, and I go, nope. The difference between a $4,500 speaker and a $7,500 speaker is about $3,000.
Yep.
So it's exactly what you say. It's what is the market willing to pay? Now, because as a speaker or a consultant or a coach, we are the product. We're not pricing soybeans. We're not pricing barrels of oil. In your experience, or just even with you personally, these practices and principles that are well proven with pricing and economics, and when it comes to applying those, do we screw ourselves up sometimes? And how do we screw ourselves up? And how do we get unscrewed up?
Sometimes, almost all the time, we mess this up. Almost always. I would say the single biggest problem that I see with speakers, with solopreneurs, people who are pricing themselves, is they don't value themselves enough. Now, when I don't have enough confidence to believe that I'm worth whatever it is I want to charge, then it's, oh no, I can't charge that. I have to give a discount, or I don't feel comfortable. And my advice to new speakers is exactly what you heard me say in that story. As soon as somebody gives you your price, raise your price. I don't know what someone's willing to pay yet. I'm going to go find that number. Where's the top of the line, or the top of that number that I can get to? The one other problem that speakers or other solopreneurs really have a lot is they're too desperate for the win. And I told you this before the call, but I started a mentoring program and I charged $9,500 for it. And I'm proud that I charged $9,500 to talk to someone for 12 weeks, 1 hour a week. And what's really cool is that it weeds out people all the time. And it's like, I'm perfectly okay that you don't want to hire me. And as soon as you can say that, then it's easier to charge a big number and just say, yep, got it. Thank you.
I love that so much. I love that so much because price, and this is, if you don't mind, Mark, I'm going to kind of market test some of my pricing sound bites against you, the expert.
Sure.
What this reminds me of is that your fee or your price is a filter for the kinds of customers and clients that you want to work with. True, false, partly true?
Absolutely true. I got an email from someone the other day who obviously a startup, obviously not going to pay me money. I replied with, I have this awesome mentoring program. Here's the price. Because I didn't want him to waste my time if he wasn't going to spend that much money. Absolutely true.
And then when it comes to ROI, like the return on investment calculation, a lot of times prospects, and you made mention of this before about the $100 speaker. If I don't know what I'm getting, $100 is too much. If I know exactly what I'm getting, sometimes $10,000 is too low. How do we get into the buyer's mind, the buyer's values, the buyer's traits, the buyer's characteristics? How can we do a little bit of psychological analysis to really understand what's value to them?
There is an incredible concept called a value conversation. And a value conversation is completely about understanding how you're going to value what I'm going to deliver. And the value conversation typically goes something like, well, tell me what you're trying to get accomplished. And then once I understand that future state, the goal where you're trying to get to, then I can say, well, how would we measure that? And once I know how we measure it, we can say, well, if I could get it from 10 to 15, what do you think that would be worth to you? And we just put a dollar value on almost anything. Now, that's not an easy conversation for people to have. It should be, but it's not.
Do you feel it's important, Mark, that when we're having this value conversation, not to make any assumptions or put any numbers into our prospect's mouth, or can we help them fill in some blanks sometimes?
The goal would be to not put numbers in their mouth. The goal would be to step back and say, look, I just want to know how you think. I work tons with product companies as opposed to speakers. And as a product, I've got it's the same thing for every single customer, but different customers value it differently. My salespeople know here's what my product does and here's how some people get value, but they don't know how that specific customer is going to get value. That specific customer knows their company, but they don't know our products. It really takes the conversation between the customer and the salesperson, or the speaker in this case. It takes a true conversation so that we can both contribute and figure out what that value is. Now, if I have someone who isn't giving me numbers or can't figure it out, I might toss out things like, oh, I had this client over here and they experienced the following. Does that seem reasonable to you?
So you can do some success stories, case studies, for example, type conversations to help prompt their thinking.
If I need to, I would rather not do that. I would rather have them just give me the numbers that they believe are true. And by the way, once they give you the numbers, they believe they're true because they gave them to you. You didn't give them to them.
Absolutely. The soundbite there is no one argues with their own data.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, very, very important. Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. I know that part of what you help your clients with is segmentation. And in speaker land, we have our keynote fee, we have our consulting fee, we have our coaching packages, we have our $20 book or $30 book. So people can literally buy stuff from you from $30 to many tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars for a big, long-term, deep client engagement. The segmentation principles that you talk about, how do they apply to us where people might be working with us for an hour or a year or anything in between? How do we think about segmentation smartly?
Yeah, first off, understand price segmentation is all about I want to get different people who have different willingnesses to pay me different amounts of money. So if you have a high willingness to pay, I want to capture as much of that as I can. If you have a really low willingness to pay, I might still want to do business with you. That's what segmentation is all about. Let's break segmentation into two key types for a second. There's the type that says, I have this product and I'm charging different prices to different customers for the exact same product. And then we could say, I have different products. I build a product portfolio for the purpose of capturing different amounts of money from different customers. The former, think about senior discounts or AAA discounts. Right? That's the exact same product. I'm charging different people, different prices. For the latter, think about first class versus coach in an airplane. Two different products, two different willingnesses to pay, but it's essentially the same thing. And that's how we want to think about how do we figure out what that segmentation looks like. I would start with the first set first. Now, in NSA, I often hear this phrase called fee integrity. And I have to tell you, I cringe every time I hear it. And the reason is fee integrity says I don't do price segmentation. Ouch! I'm leaving a ton of money on the table if I don't do price segmentation. There may be, I've actually heard speakers say, I charge a lower price if it's local, I don't have to travel. Well, guess what? That's price segmentation. And that's not fee integrity. Let me back up for just a second and say I do love fee integrity for new speakers who have no confidence.
There's the soundbite of this episode, one of several, I'm sure. Wow. So let's dig into that. So if you have no confidence, that means, okay, I'm going out at X number and I just have to cling to that like a sailor clinging to a life raft.
You say the number, you shut up. If they don't buy from you, you say, thank you very much. I appreciate the offer. And you just don't go anywhere else. And what you'll find is you're going to start winning these deals and you'll start to grow that confidence that says, yes, I can win at this price that I think I deserve. Absolutely.
Let's talk about the price segmentation for the confident speaker. Yep. You mentioned local discount, which is certainly one form of price segmentation. What are some other levers that we can start to play with?
First off, local discount, I think of that more as a segmentation based on what I'm willing to accept and less on what my customer is willing to pay, right? I'm willing to accept less because I don't have to travel. I really think of price segmentation as how much is my customer willing to pay? Let's say that I'm going to go speak for an association versus speaking for a corporation. My guess is a corporation is going to pay me more than an association would. I could have two different fees. Now, it doesn't mean I have to put it on my website, right? I've got the $15,000 fee. This is what I charge, period. That, amen. Association calls, I say, I'm a $15,000 speaker, but I have a special price for associations. It's only $9,500. There it was. Who's willing to pay me more? If I were going to speak for nonprofits, I might say, oh, this is less, they've got really low willingness to pay. I'd still like the exposure. I'd still like to do the speech. I'd like to be a good guy. I'll charge a lower price to nonprofits. That's certainly okay.
I have a funny story, very quick, about nonprofits. So I closed a deal with the Philadelphia Museum of Art here in my hometown of Philly. And no problem. They paid the full fee. Everything is good. These folks had seen me speak before. This was for the membership and visitor services, and they wanted to do marketing, obviously. We signed the paperwork, Mark. Signed, sealed, delivered. I get a phone call about a week later from little Susie Cream Cheese sitting there in the office. Mr. Newman, I am so sorry. I'm calling from Linda's office, and Linda just asked me. She totally forgot to ask you, do you have a nonprofit rate? And luckily, I was thinking ahead that day, Mark. I said instinctively, I have great news. You guys are already getting my nonprofit rate. Oh, okay, thank you so much. Hangs up the phone. The piece of data I did not share with her is at that time, my for-profit rate was identical to my nonprofit rate.
Totally okay. They sign the contract at a certain number. You know they're willing to pay it. Why would you give a discount?
Exactly. It's like a posthumous discount. It's like, oh, it's already signed, but yeah, you know what? Let me put $2,000 out of my bank account and give it back to you.
Exactly. I like you that much. In fact, there's a great lesson in what you just said, and that is when somebody says yes, stop selling, stop negotiating.
That's right. The deal is done. The deal is done. Talk a little bit about, because I know you mentioned that you work with product companies more so than with service companies. What are some product pricing lessons or mantras that you think some speakers could really benefit from, just on the principle and practice level?
By the way, I think pricing is the same for speakers and for products and services. Almost everything we think about pricing the exact same way, and that's what are people willing to pay for? And as a speaker, my strong recommendation is you should be building a portfolio of products. Now, that doesn't mean get out of your lane, because we always hear pick your lane and what's your lane. It doesn't say get out of that, but it does say you should create a portfolio of products. Every time someone wants to buy something from you, you should come back with 3 offers to them. A good, better, best offer. Good is a deal that you're willing to live with, but you'd rather they not take it. Better is the deal you really want them to take, and so you're going to make more money on that one. And then best is this really outrageous, we do everything, and almost no one will ever buy it, but every once in a while they do, and you smile a lot. I would always give 3 proposals when somebody asks me for a price. And then once you've closed that deal, once you have a relationship, you should have complementary products to go along with that. What are those complementary products? They could be webinars I'm doing for that client, or it could be mentoring or coaching I'm doing for that client. But when we have more things to sell, we become more valuable. Can I teach you one more really important pricing lesson?
Please.
When people buy something, they almost always make 2 different decisions. The first decision is, am I going to buy something in the product category? And I call that a will I decision. People are not that price sensitive when they're making that will I decision. And then usually they say, okay, now which one am I going to go buy? And people become really price sensitive as soon as they start comparing different options. We, as business people, always want to try to figure out how do we either build will I products, or how do we get ourselves in situations where people are only looking at our products and not at our competitors' products. One way to do this, besides being really unique in your industry, but one way to do this is after I have a relationship with you, I can offer you more things. You're never going to go look at somebody else and say, oh, they also do a webinar program. I'd rather use them than you. All of a sudden, they're not price sensitive because we're offering them things and they're only looking at us saying yes or no.
Wow, there's like 5 or 6 great lessons all embedded in there. Is part of that having a well-branded or well-positioned program? So out of all the leadership speakers, you are the only leadership speaker that has the super duper jizzle whizzle program that has some very compelling brand or very compelling value prop or very compelling outcome? Is it about branding? Is it about positioning? Define what a Will I product needs to have in it.
It always comes down to the mind of the buyer. There are lots of different ways you could build a Will I product. If you are a leadership speaker, it is really going to be hard to build that into a Will I product. Now, I'm almost a Will I product because there aren't that many pricing speakers out there. There aren't that many people who do price education. And from my perspective, that makes it really easy for me to throw out a price and you don't like it. Okay, great, I'll walk away. Doesn't bother me. But if you're going to be leadership, you have to say it's something other than leadership. Maybe leadership gets the initial attention, but you have to be something different. And it isn't, I'm a leadership speaker who, it's, I'm this. And that drives great leadership. And people need to identify you as something very unique in order to be a Will I product. Now, by the way, Patricia Fripp is a Will I product. There are people who hire her year after year after year after year. And that's because they liked her last year. They're hiring again next year. They're not saying, well, do we want Patricia or somebody else? They're saying, we're taking Patricia. That's a Will I product. By the way, she's not always a Will I product. Sometimes she competes for business. Sometimes she's a which one product.
So if we're a which one product, and I talk about this again as the amateur pricing guy, not the professional pricing guy. I said there's always three choices that your buyer has. Your buyer has choose you, your buyer has choose a competitor, or your buyer has, well, it's really four, competitor and or alternative. Let's put that in one column. And then the third choice is do nothing. Don't have a speaker. Don't bring in a consultant. Don't hire the executive coach. Don't sign up for Mark's $9,500 mentoring program. So that's a source of competition, even if there's no competition. In fact, I would say that's the biggest source of competition. It's will I or won't I, because the won't I is so tempting. Won't I is free.
Yep, absolutely. That's that decision, the will I decision. And when they say no to will I, that's I'm going to do nothing. You've absolutely nailed it. But the really important part of the conversation we were just having is the part that says people are not price sensitive when they're making a will I decision. You're going to buy a gas for your car and you're driving through town and the average gas price is, let's say, $2.50, and there's a gas station on the corner that's charging $5. Do you go there? Absolutely not. But you're driving out in the middle of nowhere. You see the sign says last gas 75 miles. You get to the corner. There it is, $5 gas. Are you buying gas? Yes, you are. Because we didn't have a choice on which gas station to go to.
Right.
I like to say when people are making the will I decision, it isn't price that's driving that decision. Let's say you're a meeting planner and you're trying to decide, am I going to hire a speaker or bring in someone from the association to do the speech? Okay. Now, I could spend $10,000 or I could spend zero. That's a pretty big difference. So changing that 10,000 to 8,000 doesn't change my mind. Changing it to 12,000 doesn't change my mind. It takes a really big price difference to make me change my mind on that decision. Now, once I've said, hey, I'm going to spend $10,000 on a speaker, now I lay out a whole bunch of $10,000 speakers. Which one do I want? And I'll start to go, David, would you take 7,500?
No. Maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes. This is how speakers negotiate, but you're right. It's like, no, maybe. Yes, I will. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Mine.
Yeah.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. So I want to talk about, because this is the magic where I think speakers go from being a speaker to have a speaking-driven business. We've been talking about the first sale. Once they hire you as a speaker, now you've got your mentoring program. Now you've got long-term consulting. Now you've got executive coaching. Now you've got training seminars 2, 3, 4 days. Once you're a known quantity like that they've paid you, let's say $10,000, $15,000 for the speech, how does pricing factor into upselling and cross-selling situations?
It is always about willingness to pay. There isn't a single answer that I can give you there that says, hey, here's the answer. If I were doing a sales training and I go in and I do a keynote speech and I got my $10,000 for doing a sales speech, now the question is, can I turn them into a $100,000 sales training opportunity? I would bet that they're still going to compare me to other sales training organizations at that point. Even though they gave me 10K, they're still going to compare me. So that's a which one decision. Here's what's really valuable and important in this conversation we're having. Our job when we act as salespeople, which we're salespeople for our own companies, when we act as salespeople, our job should be to try to recognize what decision is our buyer making right now. When they're trying to make a will I decision, will I bring in somebody to do sales training for my team? I'm talking about the value of sales training. I'm talking about the value of that will I decision. As soon as they say something like, David, I'm considering you, or I'm considering Bob, all of a sudden I'm changing my mentality from a will I to a which one sales conversation. And now it's, how am I different from Bob? What are the advantages that I have? And what are those things worth to you as a client? Because I can do them amazingly well.
I want to also ask you, now that we're talking about competition and competitors, with our clients, we really encourage them to do a competitive scan. And part of that competitive scan is, what do they offer? What do they say? How do they say it? What are their prices? If you find the bureau websites that have all the prices listed, even if it's a price range, do you think that for most people, they should be smack in the middle of that competitor's price range? They should be in the upper third? Do you like being one of the more expensive options in any competitive market, if that's your positioning, what we talked about earlier, that premium clients really want to go to the higher end? Or should you aim for the sweet spot in the middle?
I'm not educated enough in the speaker industry to say this is the answer. My gut says I would always be towards the high end of that range if I could be. I would always try to be there. And I say that for a couple reasons. Number one, I want to have confidence in myself and my own skills. But number two, it forces me to improve my skills to be worth that much. It forces me to get better and better and better, add more and more value to my clients, and care a ton about the amount of value I'm giving to my clients.
I think fee escalates your value, and then your value also escalates your fee. But it's definitely a two-way street, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have something very compelling about one of my favorite words in your book about free. It's under the portfolio pricing that no product is an island, no speaker is an island. How to get paid for quote unquote free. Talk about that concept and how that might apply.
Well, we as speakers do that all the time. We get paid for free. There are lots of speakers out there that go give free speeches and then they sell stuff from the back of the room. Perfectly legitimate way to make business. And what we're doing is giving content away for free. I'm going to give kudos to one of my favorite speakers, Darren LaCroix, if I may. So Darren, when I was a first new Toastmaster 10 years ago, however long ago it was, I watched Darren give the most amazing speech, and he's given free content to me for free. It's just, oh my gosh, why is he doing this? I don't get this. And as I learn and I study, I realize, oh my gosh, that's just the tip of the iceberg. He's giving away this amazing stuff because he knows he's got a huge amount of information and content that is going to benefit me. And maybe one day I'll pay him money for that. Absolutely. There's so many ways that we as speakers could be doing this. In the world of social media and freemium nowadays, we see that a ton. I'm on LinkedIn every single day. I post 2 or 3 different things on LinkedIn. I respond to people on LinkedIn. And to me, that's my way of giving back for free to the community, because I want everybody to say, oh yeah, Mark, he's a pricing expert. He knows what the heck he's talking about. He's a nice guy. Always there.
You have something in your book that I think is profound, especially for the next year or two. I'm not an economist. I don't play one on TV, but some smart people that I follow say that we're heading for another crash of some kind. 2020, 2021, it's in the cyclical, whatever. You've got a section in your book that says, responding to the economy, the 800-pound gorilla. So when things hit the fan, it's not if, but when, anytime that we have 2001, 2008, 2011, you pick your economic collapse. how does pricing change and how does pricing stay the same?
It is always going to come back to what's my market willing to pay. Always. And if the market crashes, if the economy crashes, the question is what's happening in your market? I can tell you that McDonald's is not lowering the prices of hamburgers when the economy crashes,
Right.
because it's not hitting their marketplace. If we as speakers, the economy crashes, we have fewer meetings, now all of a sudden I've got to find a way to get business. Well, what are we going to do with that? Are we just going to lower our price and compete with everybody? I got to tell you, that's a pretty lose-lose situation for every speaker out there. But it's probably what's going to happen because our competition is lowering their price. And if we want to stay in that game, we probably have to do the same. What I would be doing is trying to figure out what could I offer that is different than what I offered today at lower price points. And that way I'm not devaluing what I do today, but I'm trying to meet the customer's requirements and meet their pricing, their cost concerns at the same time. But it's hard. This is when the economy changes, all that's happening is we're changing the market dynamics. And we've got to see what the new market dynamics are like and play in that game.
Right. And what I'm hearing you say is it's really about relevance. So think about, this is just sparking a thought in my head now, that when there's a recession or when there's an economic downturn, people should be creating a will-I product for the economic downturn. Am I correct?
Oh, if that's possible, absolutely. That would be amazing. Do you have one in mind that you're thinking of?
Well, for you, yes. How about, pricing strategies in an economic downturn, pricing strategies when no one feels like buying, because at that point, what you're harnessing is the now more than ever factor. You say, when everything is peachy and rosy and wonderful, my stuff is good. My stuff is really solid. It's a good program. It's a nice to have. But now that you're telling me that you're in a recession, this is terrible, all of our members are hating it, the sky is falling, my program now moves from a nice to have to a have to have.
Yeah, I love that. That was great.
Relevance means that if you have a recession-specific product and there's a recession coming, you want to trot out that recession-specific product before anybody else does and take over the market with it.
And it isn't just pricing, right? How to lead in an economic downturn, how to sell when buyers are cost conscious.
Exactly. Customer service when customers are few and far between.
Yes, that was brilliant.
I try and contribute now and again. I try and help out here. So you mentioned LinkedIn. I am fascinated by LinkedIn. Besides the posting and the engagement that you mentioned, are you using LinkedIn for prospecting? And if so, what strategies are you finding effective to connect with some potential prospects there?
I'm embarrassed to answer this question, David. Besides the mentoring program, I don't sell anything today. And I don't really care if I sell the mentoring program. I just wait for people to call me and say, Mark, I need some help. That's going to change in the near future. I just about have my new subscription pricing course ready to go. And we're going to go out and start selling it aggressively and pushing it. Am I going to use LinkedIn? Absolutely. Right? I got 19,000 people who follow me on LinkedIn. It is going to be the place where I live and push, but I don't do it today, and I'm sorry.
Apology accepted. Let's do a little inside baseball, because I know in addition to your own business, you have this fantastic relationship with the Pragmatic Institute, Pragmatic Marketing, and all those really smart cookies. And they're really like you said about product, they're the product marketing, product lifecycle gurus, and you got plugged into them. How did that happen? How did you sort of join forces? What has that done for your business and your platform? Talk about that whole relationship.
I think my book came out in 2011, although the latest version says 2018. It's just a reprint of it. My book came out in 2011, and I wrote that book because I wanted to become a professional speaker. And I thought, hey, this would be a great way to get into this. I had a full-time job, so let's just write a book. And it was amazing because, and I was blogging a lot. And it turned out my blog I called Pragmatic Pricing. And I didn't know Pragmatic Marketing even existed. And I got a call from Pragmatic Marketing, and I think they thought I was trying to steal their brand, but I wasn't. And they eventually said, well, we'd really like a pricing course. Could you create a pricing course for us? I said, sure, no problem. And I created one. And, lots of detail, but I took it in one day to present to them. And as I'm leaving that day, the president of the company said to me, Mark, I just got to tell you, for the first 15 minutes, we were all in there evaluating a pricing course. After 15 minutes, we were all taking a pricing course. Best comment ever. I was like, oh, that was huge. That was huge. They ended up buying the course. They bought me. They bought my blog. And then they asked if I'd be an instructor because I think just like they do. And I had the best 5.5 years ever because I was standing in front of rooms teaching product management, product marketing, pricing, tons of opportunity to speak, to practice my speaking skills, to influence people, to change people's lives. It was just the most amazing experience. I absolutely loved it. The only reason I left is because I wanted to do my own thing again.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's end with your own thing. The book, of course, is called Impact Pricing, Your Blueprint for Driving Profits. And tell us about other resources, tools, other ways people can get connected and stay connected to Mark.
The easiest thing to do to stay connected to Mark, join me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting in there. I have a newsletter that I put out once a month. You can go to my website, impactpricing.com, and grab that. And in the near future, if you're interested in subscription pricing, which I have to say is a really hot topic and very few people understand it, we will be releasing a course, I would say mid-May, on subscription pricing. Look for that. It may be video or it may just be instructor-led at first, and then we'll make it video later.
Very cool. Very exciting. That's also going to be linked on impactpricing.com?
Oh, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, Mark Stiving, this has been a fantastic treat and a pleasure. More to come. We're going to hook everyone up with the show notes when they listen in and tune in, and pop over to thespeakingshow.com right under this episode. And thank you for being with us. This was totally tremendous.
Oh, my pleasure. I had a great time.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.